Hi there, Trevor again from Software Training for Students. In this video we will be learning about the real meat of why databases are useful, queries. Queries are basically questions that one can ask a database management software about a particular database. For example, using the last database we worked with, I might be able to write a query to find out how many orders a specific supplier has filled. Or maybe I could produce an alphabetical list of each product offered along with its relative order frequency. The questions you can ask with queries can be as simple or as complicated as you like. You just need to know how to write them, or find a program that can write them for you. Queries are written in a language called SQL. That stands for Structured Query Language. We'll begin to look at the language itself later in this video, but we will start with the way Access creates queries, the QBE, or the Query by Example grid. This will speed up the process of writing queries and give us an introduction to what they can do. First, open the database in the Yelp example folder. It should be called Yelp Dataset Challenge Small. Make sure to click on Enable Content in the yellow bar on top. And take a look through some of the tables in this database. This database is a truncated version of a dataset available from Yelp.com. The database shows information about all Yelp businesses in Wisconsin, but we've sort of cut that down a little bit so that we have a smaller dataset of only the businesses in the capital area of Madison. Once you're here in Access, click on Database Tools and Relationships to see how these tables are all sorted out. It's a little bit complicated since we have so many, but you can move the tables around to have them make a little bit more sense. Basically, what we have is a table of businesses related to a bunch of information about the businesses, including some many-to-many relationships between businesses and users of Yelp. These users of Yelp are related to the businesses through the tables of their reviews and tips that they've given each business. So again, these many-to-many relationships from business to user are enacted through the intermediary tables of tip and reviews. These relationships are necessary for the QBE grid. If you would like more practice populating an Access database yourself instead of having just this one we gave you, there is a folder named Data that contains Excel files for all the tables in the database. If you would like to, you can go to File and click on New, Blank Desktop Database. Name it what you want and click Create. I'll now quickly show you how to create a table and populate it at the same time, rather than creating it first and populating it later. If I go to the Import Link half of my External Data tab and click on Excel, instead of text file this time, click on Excel, and find the data folder in your Yelp example folder. I'll first go with the attributes table, open up the attributes file, and check the first option this time. Import the source data into a new table in the current database. Looks good. You can click on OK. You can click on Next for the first step. And for the second step, you'll need to make sure that first row contains column headings is checked. This makes it so that column labels don't end up being actual records in our database. They instead become the labels or the field names. Click on Next. Click on Next again. And then we'll be choosing our own primary key. So click the second option and make sure that the primary key is whatever you would like it to be. In our case, our primary key for the attribute table is Business ID. Then click on Next and click on Finish, and then Close. You've now got an attributes table in the left-hand side, so you can click on it, and it's all there. So if you'd like to, you can continue populating this database through the Excel files that you have and give them relationships. If you need any help with this process, refer back to video number 2, or remember that you can always send us an email if you have questions. As for me, I'm going to go back to the pre-filled database. So here we are in our completed database. I'm going to go to the Create tab and click on Query Design in the Queries panel. A Show Table dialog box will appear. Let's just choose Business and then click on Add. As you can see, this Show Table box takes a table that we already have and puts it into our query visual interface. It looks a little bit like the relationship interface, and it is pretty similar. For now, we'll be good with this, so you can click on the X or close in the Show Table box. For our first query, we're going to ask Access to give us the business ID, business name, and rating of every business in the database. To create this query, we're going to put the related fields onto the QBE grid. This QBE grid is right here on the lower half of your screen. To get fields onto the QBE grid, you can either double-click on them in the business table here. I'll double-click on business ID, and there it'll pop up in the first column of my QBE grid. And I can also click and drag. So I'll click business name and drag it to the second column spot. And there it is. Going back to the first way, I'll double-click on stars in the business table, and it will show up in the third column. So remember that all of these are fields in our business table. If you go back to the business table, you'll see business ID, business name, and stars as 3 columns of our table. Going back to the query 1, remember that you can switch between open objects in Access by clicking on their respective tabs. And our query looks good. We've got their 3 values that we want to see, and they're all in the right order. So let's take a slightly closer look. The QBE grid not only has columns where the different fields will go, but every column has rows. First one is the field name, and the second one is the table name. The table name is important because 2 different tables could have the same field name, so the table name will help to differentiate between those variables. You'll notice that the show box is checked for all 3, and that's good. We'll come back to it in a little bit. We'll also come back to the sort and criteria rows. To run this query, make sure you're on the Design tab under Query Tools, and click on Run. Here we see our query has been successful. We have the business ID, business name, and number of stars for every single business in our database. Looks pretty good. What we see now is actually just a different view of our same query. We can get back to the design view of this query in the same way that we were switching views before, with this button in the top left corner of your screen. Click on View and choose Design View. Notice SQL View is an option as well. We'll come back to that in a little bit. So click on Design View. And let's limit our results a little bit. I'm going to give a criteria to Access. For example, I only want to see businesses that are given 5 stars. So this is where the criteria row is going to come in. Under the stars field, I will put my cursor in the criteria box and type equals 5. This will limit the query's results so that we still see the 3 fields, business ID, business name, and stars, for every business, but we only see the businesses that have a 5 in their stars value. I said I'd come back to these show tabs. I'm going to uncheck the show box for stars. Otherwise, I just have one big column of 5s. Let's run our query. We have a very small list of results now. So this looks pretty good, but we can go one step deeper. Let's go back to the View tab, and instead of going back to Design View, let's click on SQL View. This is the SQL code that Access has automatically written for us. This code is automatically derived by Access, and thus it's going to be a little bit messy in some parts, but functionally, it'll be good for what we're looking at today. Notice the 3 keywords: select, from, and where. Select and from are looking at the table values that we're looking at in our query. We have business ID and business name. We also have the table that both of those values came from, just business. So it works pretty much semantically at this point. Select these 2 fields from this table where this criteria is set to be true. Notice that stars is not in the select line because we've unchecked the show box for that field. We'll come back to this later. For now, I'll go back to View and click on Design View. Every business in our dataset has a category. For example, Italian, for Italian food businesses. Let's create a slightly more complicated query, which allows you to input the name of a business category and return all of the 4 or 5-star reviews for businesses in that category, along with the restaurant names for which they're associated. So let's begin a new query by clicking Create, Query Design. In the Show Table box, let's show 3 of our tables. First Business, then Reviews, then Categories. I'm selecting multiple tables by holding down the Control key as I click on the 3 that I like. So Business, Reviews, and Categories while holding Control, and click on Add. They'll pop up, and you can click on the X or Close to get rid of this Show Table box. Notice that you can see the relationships between these 3 tables. If you don't see the relationships, you will definitely need to make them before you can use them in the QBE grid. We'll be taking 4 fields from these 3 tables. First, business name from the business table, then review ID and stars from the reviews table, and then category name from the categories table. Let's run this right now just to make sure that everything's going well. Click on Run, and we can see the 4 fields. It's a very long list. So what we're going to do is break it up a little bit. Let's go back to Design View by clicking on View, Design View for a query. And we'll break up this data by giving it some totals. The first total we'll work with is an aggregation called count. So to find the totals, just click on the Totals button in the Show and Hide panel. And a total row will appear in our QBE grid. Group by is the default value, and it just means that every single record is going to be treated as an individual. So that's why we had so many records in our first table. Instead of group by for review ID, let's change it to count. So this will make it so that we don't see every single record. Instead, if we click on Run, we can see something slightly different. What you should see here is that instead of the review ID, we're getting the count of reviews. We're getting multiple reviews because we have different category names for each business, and the category totals are set to group by. The stars are also set to group by, so the individual star values and the individual category values are breaking up our 43 North business into probably 15 or so records. However, what we can see here is we can see that this business has 1 1-star review, 4 2-star reviews, 16 3-star reviews, and so on. The reason it's broken into 3 different records for every star number is because it's in 3 different categories. So what we'll do is we'll put totals on both the stars and the category names. Let's work with stars first. Let's go back to View and choose Design View. Under stars, we're going to change group by to where. This will give us the ability to set a criteria. This will work somewhat like the criteria that we used in the first example for queries, but in this case, we're going to group by this criteria instead of just showing every single record that passes the criteria itself. So we'll see what this means. I want to see a count of every pretty good review, so I'm going to label that as a 4, 4.5, or 5-star review for a business. So my criteria will be set to greater than or equal to 4. Let's click on Run. And you should see something like this. Now we have a very much condensed database as opposed to what we had going on before. We see that every business is given a count of reviews. This count is only counting the 4, 4.5, or 5-star reviews because of the criteria that we gave under the where total. So if you don't see something like this, go back to your QEE grid and Design View, and make sure that your table looks like mine. So our remaining problem, if we look in our datasheet view, is that every business is still being shown the number of times that it has categories. So AA China is in Chinese and also restaurants, so it's being shown twice. We're going to put another totals on this category name so that we don't have to sift through so much extraneous information. Additionally, we can add a fun little interactive element to our query. Let's go back to Design View and change Group By to Where for category name. For the criteria, I could just show any particular category, such as equals restaurants, in quotes. And this query will give us all of the restaurants with 4 or 5 star reviews. Instead of this criteria, type the following. 2 square brackets encapsulating the words enter category name. This is what's known as a parameter, and when you click on the run, you'll see what it does. You're given a little box where you can enter the category name of a business. Notice that the enter category name right here in the enter parameter value box equals the text in the criteria. I'll click on cancel, and I'll edit the text. If I run this again, I can see that the criteria value for parameter is what prompts the user. So here you can type in restaurants or bars or maybe Italian and then click on OK. Then you'll be given every Italian business and the count of their 4 or 5 star reviews. Let's go back to Design View and improve this just slightly more with the sort box. For sort, I'm going to go to the review ID field. This is where the actual number of reviews is coming in. I'll click on the drop-down box and choose descending, because I'd love to start from the highest values and go down to the smallest values. Click on descending for the sort value of review ID field, and then click on run one last time. Maybe I'll choose bars and click on OK. And here we have the bars in Madison with the very highest number of 4 and 5 star reviews. So this query is pretty great, but I'd love to be able to save it. I can do that very easily. Right-click on the tab for Query 2 and click on Save. Save this query as something descriptive that will accurately represent what your query is all about. I'm going to name it Good Reviews Count and click on OK. You'll see if you scroll down in your Objects panel on the left side of your screen that your query appears at the very bottom. Congratulations! You've created your very first queries. In the next video, we'll be starting from the absolute basics and building queries from scratch. If you have any questions with these videos, send us an email or sign up for an Ask a Trainer appointment. Just go to wisc.edu/STS. Thanks for watching.